welcome to another Guns Contracts video. Today is another bit of a kind of day in the working life of. A few people have expressed interest in seeing the kind of jobs I get up to and yeah, what a sort of typical kind of job is for me. I don't think there is a typical job, but I'll kind of show you what I do, some of the reasons why we do what we do, trying to explain a little bit about how I guess how I apply the machinery I own and operate in some different settings, and yeah, the reasons why I have things set up like I do sort of become apparent when you see them in a real life situation. So a bit of a strange job, this one, working alongside a lot of newly planted trees. These were all trees, there's loads of them down in that direction, I'll show you in a minute, bit of B-roll, and there's also plenty going forward. So I'm sort of working along the bottom of a bank, there's a little bit on a bank, and yeah, it's a bit of a tight space. I'm up against the boundary of the property here. I think there's 40 or 50 new trees put in here. I actually wasn't involved in this particular tree planting exercise. Often I am, but wasn't on this one. And as I say, they were planted earlier in spring. They've become established. We've been irrigating them. You can see the kind of the irrigation line running down the side, which is an extra thing to try and avoid. And what I'm tasked with doing here is trying to remove the weeds, essentially, in the grass and the green vegetation that's kind of self-seeded itself and sprung up over the summer. And the reason we're doing that is because it's going to get like a wildflower seed mix, and I know there's many different types of that, and I'm not 100% sure exactly what mix is going in here, but this bank up here towards the greenhouse area is already been seeded, and the idea is to do the same around these trees as well. So it's an area of the garden that's not particularly frequented all that often, but these trees are going to be here to sort of provide a little bit of a screen, and there are breaks in them in places to provide sort of viewing opportunities. It's a really nice view actually off to my left hand side, not that you can see it, this hedge is in the way, but from up where the house is, the hill slopes up, and the house is up there, and yeah, it's a really nice lovely view on a sunny day anyway. On a bit of a wet, misty, murky September day like this, it's I guess a bit autumnal, really. It's probably the word for it. Anyway, so that's what I'm doing. Wildflower seed is a bit of a buzzword at the moment, and there's it's quite a popular thing to have. Doesn't work in all situations. It actually thrives on poorer soil, so the fact that I'm pulling off a bit of topsoil here is no bad thing, really. It doesn't actually like the best kind of soil conditions, and some plants thrive in other things. Remember, wildflower seed is essentially a blend of what would otherwise be termed as weeds, really, and they tend to be pioneering species. They grow early on in a mix and provide food and nectar and other things for insects, which then in turn provides food for birds and mammals, etc. And off it goes. And we don't necessarily need a science lesson today for this bit of excavating, but the principle here is that actually we're not really looking for the most sort of topsoil to hang around particularly. This is where it gets tight in these trees. You have to think about where you're going to put your pile as you're going to then be able to recover it and get yourself out, because I can't spin round here. So yeah, it's been the challenge, and of course don't want to damage the trees because they're expensive, and it would quite quickly erode my money here if I started smashing trees about. So Anyway, yeah, so that's kind of the job really, is to strip this grass off. On the face of it, you know, not particularly interesting, but as I say, the access makes it a little bit trickier, and we have to think about how we're going to go about it. I'm going to leave little piles of gear all through here, and then the idea, because we're on a slope, can't really get a dumper safely to a lot of these locations. I mean, where I'm actually sat is okay, but to get here you've got to drive up on that slope up on the right there. So we're going to use the little secret weapon known as the ditch witch, which if you haven't seen one of those before, I have done a little brief video on it. I know a couple of people now that own these sort of ditch witch machines. It's essentially a stand-on tracked skid steer, incredibly maneuverable, very, very versatile, and yeah, in this particular instance we'll be using it to get these little piles out, probably so that we can then tip into a dumper and then run them. Kind of got to go all the way around the outside of this property. There's about 12 acres here, so it's a fair size plot. And yeah, we'll run these round then to where we can actually get a grab lorry too, because I'm kind of deep down in the back end of this property. So that's going to be the plan. So if you see me just leaving little piles about, that's the idea there. It'd be nice to kind of work with the machine and kind of work along, but I can't drive everything, and the operator of the ditch witch is currently busy helping out with some block work. So I said, well, I'll just keep going and get some piles set up in places, and then we can sort of work together and clean it all up and kind of do a final grade. Because the only other problem with running any machine back in here is that, you know, essentially you're going to be driving back on bits that I've already kind of scraped and graded, which you know, with tracks it might not be too bad, but the rain we've had, it's likely to cause a little bit of excess damage, no doubt. Sometimes you can't avoid it, you know, and you try and avoid doing work twice, but sometimes it's not always possible. Anyway, working along here, just using the grading bucket, because again, you know, we're just looking to scrape turf off. It's far too wet to be trying to entertain my landscape rake, which would have been the other kind of tool that I would have used, but also because we're not looking to really save the topsoil, particularly in this location. You know, the riddling effect that the landscape rake can do if you want it to is not really worth the benefit here. So just got the grading bucket on, and just taking a very thin layer really of the weeds off and a tiny little bit of soil with it, and that'll be ready. I think they're going to hydroseed the wildflower mix in, which is kind of an interesting technique. I don't know if I'll be here to see it, sadly, but you see it on motorway embankments sometimes. They essentially create the seed in a slurry kind of mix, and sometimes you can even coat it with like a fertilizer, and although that won't be the case for a wildflower, but yeah, and they spray it on and it kind of sticks to the ground. You might have seen it, say, on motor embankments. It's sort of like a bluey colour, like a bit of a dye in it, so you can tell the areas that you have coated and the areas, you know, that you haven't done yet. It's quite an interesting idea. It is going to be a challenge to get that set up down here, because you can only pump so far. But that is ultimately not my responsibility. We will come up with a plan of how to go about that. But yeah, first job is to clear this area really. There is an old, when they planted these trees earlier this year, they kind of made a bit of a track as well, so there is a little bit of a track here and some ruts that I'm also sort of grading out as we go. It's all sort of part of this job. But yeah, so got I don't know, it's probably 250 meters of this to do. It varies in width in places. It's a bit of an eyeball job, you know, it's on the plan, but it's sort of, you know, what you see. If you see something and you think it needs a bit of a pull or a grade or whatever, then do it. And that is what I do a lot of. You know, there's a lot of this landscaping work. It's kind of, there is no real right answer to it. You know, you have to you have to use your brain a bit and see what looks right sometimes, you know, just because it shows this on the drawing doesn't necessarily mean that that's how it wants to be. So and that's a classic example with this. But tilt rotator's dead handy. Get round some of these trees, work tidy, all of these sort of benefits that, you know, you could do it with a fixed bucket, and a lot of the time you'll see me operating here with, you know, tilt rotator in a straight normal mode. But it's particularly useful when you can't access, you know, round the back of a tree and you can't maneuver the machine to get to that. You can often do a better job with your tilt rotator, I have found. So always a useful bit of kit to have. And always a tricky job as well when you're having to look at the top of the dipper to make sure you're not going to snap any tree branches, and also the underside of the you know, the bucket under the tree to make sure that you're actually doing what you're doing. So I'll crack on with this for a bit and yeah, show you how we get on this job, which, as I say, on the face of it, not particularly thrilling or anything, but it's all part of what goes into making these, you know, large landscaping schemes that I am lucky enough to be able to work on. You know, it's all part of making it happen, taking the design and making it a reality, I guess. So yeah, we'll crack on. I will show you how I get on. This is the job at the moment, is to try and get these piles cleared up. The weather is really against us here and traction is pretty limited, especially for poor little ditch witch. So I'm helping him by pushing piles into his bucket. He's got quite a quick turnaround, and I just don't think you'd get a dumper feasibly down and around these trees. You can see he's having to take quite a tight route here. We just can't, you know, afford to be damaging trees, because the ditch which is very low to the ground, it, you know, just sort of glides past stuff. It is a really handy tool. up to another load. So it doesn't take him long. Gets himself in a position, tries to push in, and then he's bucket up the rest of the way, which seems to work. And I can tidy up as we go. I'll have to tidy the tracks. There's obviously going to be track marks from density. It has to turn and stuff, but actually with it being so wet, it's kind of not digging the ground up, it's just sliding on the surface, which is a little bit easier to deal with. But yeah, some of these clods and mud and stuff will have to be tidied up. But got to make the best of what you've got sometimes with the kit that you've got available to you. And that's what we're up to here. So you join us certainly a few days later. It may even be a couple of weeks later. Time seems to fly at the moment. Since I was originally clearing this turf and stripping this area, and sadly the weather is not on board this year. If you live in the UK, you'll certainly know what I mean, and I think a lot of Europe has had similar issues with excessive periods of rain. Sort of abnormal really for the time of year, but it is what it is. We can't really fight it. I definitely think this winter is going to be a long one, that's for sure. But we are out of control of weather, so we've had to come up with another plan, another game plan, a way around this. Still trying to get this hydroseeded for the end of October. That is still the plan, and a target that we're really keen to meet. But we're going to have to take a slightly different approach to getting this ground prepped. If I leave it sealed off like this, it's fine. It's keeping it relatively dry. I mean, it's only puddling at the bottom of the hill and things, but it's not going to be any good for the hydroseed. It's going to wash the seed off. The seed's got no seed bed, no prep, nothing. So having had a chat with the hydroseeder, we had a meeting with him the other day about where he can and can't get to. It's quite a clever setup actually. He comes in with a pickup. Rumour has it he's got a Unimog setup as well, which I'd love to see, but sadly he's not going to bring that here. But yeah, he's got like a tank on the back of his pickup on a trailer, and can, obviously a length of hose, reels of hose, and can get a lot of where we need to get to, luckily off of areas that I can get him to with that. So we're kind of going to go for a bit of a phased approach. This area is going to be one of the first areas to get done, because it's kind of furthest away. Whilst it's down the bottom of the house, it's also kind of at the end of a track that we need to work our way back up. So we're gonna start down here. It's quite a big area, this, in between all these trees and various things. And he suggested that really the only thing we can do, and he's right, is scratch the surface up, run the teeth through it, basically try and give the seed somewhere to sit. At least it's not going to get washed off like this and various things. So I am trying my best. I mean, in places here it's wet because it's at the bottom of the slope, and it's a lot more smeary than it is in other places. But at some places it is, there is a little bit drier underneath, and you can sort of fluff it about and do something. This won't be the final finish. We're going to have to probably roll this. If it ever does dry out, we'd be looking to roll it like you do with crops really in a field. But yeah, if it doesn't, at least we'll get some establishment and start making some progress. Maybe it'll need overseeding again next spring or not. Difficult to know now, isn't it? It really depends how this winter is. If we get heavy frosts as well, it's not going to do it any good. Newly established seed, but we want to get it. That's why I want to get it in the ground by the end of October, so it's got half a chance of germinating and then surviving any potential cold weather sort of going into November onwards. So time is against us, the weather is definitely against us, and yeah, we're having to make it work. I'd love to use my my landscape rake on this, but it's just too wet. It'll clog it up. 50mm spacings that has on the one for this machine, and that would have done a lovely job back in sort of late August, although let's face it, it was raining then. So yeah, we're having to make do with running teeth through it, which is a bit of an old school method, but it is doing the trick. It's opening the ground up a little bit and giving that seed somewhere to bed. A little bit of a laborious task, but you can cover some ground pretty quick, and it's just trying not to leave too big a sods really. I don't know how it looks on camera. It doesn't particularly look great to me here. I guess you get used to working to a certain standard of finish, and then when you're forced to do this, yeah, you just feel like you're going backwards in life. But we're not going to get, the original plan was to run the Harley rake over it, which is like a rotating, some people call them a stone rake. It's like a sort of rotating bar with little carbide teeth on, and that would have smashed all of this surface up and created a really lovely fine seed bed, removed any of the little flints and stones on the surface, and well, yeah, they do a fantastic job. A lot of Americans use them. It's a very popular attachment over in America. It's sort of nicknamed a Harley rake because I think that's one of the brands. Great bit of kit, but yeah, not going to work in this wet stuff. It just smears the soil because it's basically like a rotating sort of mulcher shaft really, and it'll just smear, create a pan, and then you've got no chance of getting any establishment of any seed. So yeah, back old school with this, and it's just where we are. I can't wait any longer. We've got a lot of areas to prep. I've got work I can't finish because we've still got the track open down to here, so it's kind of sadly, the time has come. We've got to do something with it, which is why there's a bit of a delay between these sort of segments of the video. Anyway, got to show you the good and the bad and the struggles we all face. It does happen to everyone, and it's about how you what you do with it and how you make it work. In a year's time, you'll forget all about the struggles with the weather and all of this fighting its way all the way. But for now, it just seems very real, doesn't it? A lot of this area, anyway, it is going to be wildflower. We're not creating a bowling green here, so arguably, when this settles down a bit, I mean, if it dries out before the hydroseeder comes, we will attack it with the stone rake, and it'll leave a lovely finish. But reality is now we need probably 10 days of clear weather, dry weather, not raining at night, in the day at all, and that's just asking for an awful lot coming into mid-October. But this year particularly, I think it's unrealistic. I just can't see how we're going to get that kind of break in this weather, looking at how things are going. So yeah, that's where we are. I will keep fighting the good fight. I hope everyone else out there is managing to get something done as well, because it's harder, and it's certainly less profitable, and you can't do as good a job, but we still have to do something, don't we? Here we are, the old 750 digging bucket on, ripping ground up. Gone old school. Used to work for them, didn't it? So why can't it work for me? Well, it can. It's going to. It's got to. No other choice. Anyway, I'll crack on with this and catch you in the next segment.